Okay, here we go. We're rolling here at Rainbow's End in Humboldt County, California, and we have a very special guest tonight on this Labor Day weekend. It's Sunday night, and this is her last night here. She's going to be driving back home tomorrow, so we wanted to get her podcast in because she is our headliner. She's our special guest. This is Agnes McGillicuddy, also known as
Crystal Fuger,
and also known as Bestie to Bestie, and my favorite person to be in a foxhole with. So we are celebrating women in the trades this Labor Day weekend, and we are featuring Crystal Fuger because Crystal Fuger is somebody who has supported women in the trades, and that is, look at that.
Okay.
It was probably a fox. I bet it was a fox. The foxes like to, yeah. So anyway, there you get a really good look at her. Isn't she beautiful? And so Crystal is actually my favorite support person that I've ever worked with because she is so thorough and so caring about her clientele and her end product. So I just wanted to bring her in, and it's all about her, so I'm hiding behind the camera today. And wanted to bring her in and just introduce you to her because she's going to be a huge part of PowerGirl Productions, both hopefully behind the scenes and in front of the camera. I think she has a lot to offer. We working together was a very enjoyable thing for me, and it's just because she's just so bright and so eager and able to process map, to produce, to get things done, to check the boxes, and to do it well so that it only has to be done once. So that is why I wanted to introduce you to our Agnes McGillicuddy, and just give you an opportunity to get to know her. And so I'm going to let her introduce herself and give us a little bit of background. So tell us about yourself.
Let's see. I drove down here just yesterday from Vancouver, Washington. I was born there. I actually grew up in a small town in Oregon. Then at about a very young age, I moved to California. I was there for about 15 years, and 10 of those...
Where did you move to California?
I moved to San Francisco.
Not just anywhere.
Not
California.
just anywhere. I moved to San Francisco, and then I think I got really lucky in going into my career because I was at home, expecting my baby when the San Bruno incident happened. So I watched it on the news. I wasn't working at the time. When my baby was about 6 months old, a recruiter had gotten a hold of my resume for the local utility company. And I went and interviewed, and that's kind of how my career started, really. And I was very, very lucky. And my first job was to handle internal movement of bargaining unit employees. So it was really my entry into working with the trades and working with these,
so what kind of people were you working with in that position, in that role?
So in that role specifically, over my time in that role, I supported the entire department. So that would be every bargaining unit employee had, according to the contract, a certain way they could move within their position to different locations. They could move up in their position. Personally, mine was for utility clerks, materials handlers,
pretty much anybody in the contract book, right?
Yeah.
Any of the job titles in the contract book,
right? And it was a powerful job. It was a really,
so working with bidding, right?
Yes, working with job bidding.
Very cool. And then where'd you go from there?
From there, I went to the internal training department, technical training.
Okay.
We refer to it as the academy. I worked specifically with gas. So that was under my purview. And then I would help and support the other schools that were involved with electric transmission and distribution. So that would be our lineman schools. So helping kind of that school with their processes as they brought on, you know, peers of like the same job that I did.
Because you were kind of somebody you were a developer of processes, and people would adopt your processes, correct?
Yes, that is correct. They did not come overnight. When I started, I think for me, it was having been at that company and having gone through that training. I sought that department out. Having worked with those employees so much and having to answer their questions, work with their supervisors to make time. To me, it was the next level of supporting those employees, because a lot of times they are not in an office where they can just go talk to their boss. They are their own entity. They are literally keeping the gas flowing and the lights on. So what can I, in my small part and in my role, do to make sure they have the most immersive learning experience possible, so when they do leave and they do walk out the doors of the classroom, they're ready to do their job. And so that was a big passion of mine.
Right, and I would add seamless, having the pleasure of working with you. That was something that you really brought to the table, was that when your signature was on it, it went off like a hitch, right?
It did. And you know what's so funny is that it didn't happen overnight. That evolution of thought took time, really. You know, I learned pretty quick. The ego check happened pretty quick. In that industry, when you're in the utility industry.
Doesn't it, though?
Yeah.
Doesn't it just kick you right in the face?
It does. You kind of have to have an ego walking in, so you have the charisma and the wherewithal.
And you have to have an ego to sustain it.
Right.
Throughout, right?
I think so, but I think there's a shift that happens, and I don't know if I think I was lucky with the group of people that I worked with, because one, not only were the instructors I working with very seasoned tradespeople in their own rights. I mean, they are experts. They are sought out for what they do. They were really remarkable in teaching me what they needed to teach for these people that they're trying to get to their level. So it was never,
yes.
Yeah, it was always a matter of when a student walked in, a learner came in that room, every instructor I got to work with, and I was lucky to work with, remarkably brilliant, and wanted to bring every student that walked in that room to that level of brilliance, because these are our families that, you know.
Yes.
This is it's a community
passion. It is a community passion, and it is a family. Those are all very good words to describe.
They were fantastic.
The environment, yes.
I mean, I think for me,
I think it was a good blend, right? It was a good blend of new talent.
Yes.
It was a great blend of seasoned veteran, like you were talking, guys that had been doing the job for 25, 35 years.
Absolutely.
So, and then there were the middle schoolers, like, you know, like Leal and myself, and who just felt lucky to be there. You know?
I mean, I had a few, I had a few instructors that I think before I came on, they were kind of used to things just going wrong and having to figure it out. And then when they started getting asked the question, so what's going to make it go right? I would do a thing with the instructors. Sometimes it was casual. I just walk in when they weren't teaching and go, so what went well and what didn't? If an instructor actually had to go out into the field and teach. So, you know, this utility had, I mean, countless numbers of service yards that our instructors would have to go teach at, so they're not on home turf. And when they would come back, I would call them into my office and be like, hey, do you have 15 minutes? Can you tell me what went well and what didn't? And
go ahead, nerd girl, tell them what we call it.
We called it a plus delta session. And I think with that, I would always say, I don't know if can
you dive deep for people that aren't from the corporate world and think in those fast terms?
A plus delta. So a plus is everything they went well that they want to have happen again. So I know, okay, let's keep doing this. a delta would be something that did not go well. It needs to be changed, it needs to be adjusted, or it needs to be addressed at all. You know, a lot of times you're finding things out in the
it's field. A quick fix, right?
Sometimes it's a quick fix. Sometimes it was something I had to say, let me take this with me. I'm gonna have to work on this. This might be a bigger issue than me, or I need to kick this upstream.
Right.
But at that point, at least they were heard. There was a lot of things in my role that I could back channel into to get that correction made. You know, even if it was like, actually I need, because of the amount of paperwork that's physical, I need a prep time. Actually, you know, I got your calendar, I can block that out for you, you know. And I wish I could say like the hundreds of things that had come across.
Yeah, and that's not necessary. So anyway, so we're talking about, if we're thinking about women in the trades, you know, I think for me, I think the first thing that really pops into my mind, if I wanted to set a goal for myself and whatever influence I would have on in that genre, what would you know, what's the first thing I would want to talk about? And I really believe that value is something that we need to talk about more on many fronts, and this is just one of them.
Right.
So what does that word mean to you?
The value of women in the trades, I think what's really interesting is...
Speaking of women in the trades.
Yes, we have Miss Moxie joining me. Hello, Moxie. I think what's really interesting about women in the trades is women have been in the trades since there were trades. And, you know, so I don't think that's actually that history is really honored as much as it should. And I know during
that's
my
a great
time,
point.
I am not new as a woman in the trade. You are not new as a woman in the trade. But we are at the, you know, in some senses, especially in your capacity, it can be rare. For me as a support.
But like you say, it goes all the way back, right? Because there were pictures at the Livermore Training Center of the women on the, you know.
Yeah, women on the pole, women turning wrenches, women really getting into it. And women really being leaders, women coordinating, women making it happen.
We had a very female presence at the Academy, correct?
Yes, we did. You know, I think our boss's boss was a woman, you know, commanding. You know, I've had quite a few female leaders during my time in that industry. I think what's really amazing about having a female leader, whether she's a people leader or just a leader in personality, is what I have found is typically they tend to just let people do their jobs. They're very much, they're decisive, they are decision makers. You know, there seems to be a much more natural ability of accountability with these women in the trades. I think it's a lot easier for a woman to say that didn't go well, and it's not going to hurt her ego. She's not going to feel like she's less than. She's just going to go correct it, take the lesson, move on, and then teach everybody around her. And I think at least in my experience, the guys who haven't quite hit 20 years yet still kind of have that little step back a little bit. It's like they take it personally, whereas, you know,
that's interesting that you mentioned. This is one of the things I love about talking to you, and why I wanted to get you involved, because you have such an interesting perspective. That's absolutely correct. I would say, you know, because I'm looking back on my career and realizing that really the majority of the men that I worked with were outstanding family men who were great role models, and I am nothing but grateful for their influence on my life. So we've been lucky. We've worked with remarkable men. And then I've worked with a different kind of man. Right. Yeah. And maybe it is an experience thing. It could very well be kind of what you were pointing to.
Yeah, and to be fair, I have worked with the women in the trades that aren't, I'm not quite sure why they were there, but it wasn't for the mission. You could always kind of tell a difference between a person that was there for them and a person that was there for the mission. And I like to leave that statement gender neutral, because that's been my experience across the board. You know, if I completely messed up what I was doing and it screwed up an entire class experience, whatever it may be, it wasn't like I'm being attacked. No, I messed up. I'm going to go on and fixing it. The person that I'm working through the issue with is not going to think less of me or my capability. It's just that one time they didn't get to take what I did for granted.
That's, I mean, hence the plus delta, right? That's the demonstration of what you're just describing.
Yeah. So and a plus delta was critical for me. You're just taking
the lessons, you know. I mean, that's actually the culture that I grew up in. Was that we discussed things, we talked about near hits, you know, we talked about everything, and it was definitely different before I left. So you know, so that's what I mean. That's really what PowerGirl Productions is all about. It's one big plus delta. It's a continuation of the conversation, right?
Yeah, I think it's always a conversation.
It's an important conversation to have. The industry is an important industry to have. I think there's a lot of turmoil around it right now.
Yeah.
And I, looking back, I'm surprised at the controversy in the natural gas industry.
Yes.
And I have my own theories around that, and we're going to get deeper into that. We're not talking about that tonight, but you know, your experience in human resources, your experience as you know, passionate, strong, ethical, hard worker who's you know, like you were just saying, taking pride in what you were doing. I mean, I also grew up in the field with, you know, kind of the moniker of, you know, the job isn't worth doing if it's not worth doing right?
No, and that's absolutely right.
But I have noticed that and we all actually, you know, us older guys would notice that there was a different wave of talent coming in. Now in PG&E, it's a little different. You know, I mean, again, we were going to try to, we're going to try to stay general, but because I really feel like in the energy industry, it's the cream of the crop. It's the people that can get through these recruiting, you know, hurdles and requirements.
Yeah, I mean, what do we always used to say? We'd know within a year if a person was going to make it.
Right.
We always knew within a year.
And like you said, it takes 5 years
to really not be new anymore.
Right.
I've been really, like I said, for me, I've been blessed and cursed to work with some of the best and see some of the worst. I think what's really interesting is for old companies. These companies are old typically, and if they're newer companies, they're buying in. They're actually just a new name for an older company because these infrastructures are 100+ years old.
Well, and that I think that, you know, that's it. I love that you're touching on that because that is what we're talking about tonight. On Labor Day regarding trades, and you really hit on it when you said women have been in the trades for
as long as there have been trades.
And so, and so that you know, that's what we're, I lost my train of thought, but
yeah, I think it's really important to pin that down, is how long this has been going on. And I think what's happening now is there's a visibility now in business culture and corporate culture. And so there's a certain expectation where these very old infrastructures are, even though they're old and mature in their way, they're still modernizing culturally.
That's what I was touching on. The traditional nature of the culture of our particular industry.
Yeah.
And especially appreciative of it in the San Francisco Bay Area because of the rich history between our Northern California utility and San Francisco specifically.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of history there.
A remarkable amount of
history. And
history.
the tradition is there. Like I was saying, the GSRs they didn't even have to look at the Thomas Guide, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just knew exactly where they were going. That blew my mind.
Yeah, I think what's so funny is because, like I said, in my career, I've worked from generation to substation, substation to the transformer, and transformer to the load on the electric side. And on the gas side,
Same, right? Same with gas.
Same with gas. And I've gotten to do the same with gas. So I've gotten to, from major pipe all the way down to distribution line, and get to know every type of employee that's doing this work. And I think what we really have to remember is those guys that are about to go repair a pipe under so much pressure lives in that town. The guy that's about to go work on a 500 kV line that's powering probably hundreds of miles of homes, hospitals, schools, businesses is a guy that lives in that area. So, and it's not just a guy, it's a woman. A woman is climbing that pole. A woman is getting under houses. You are going to run across both. And guess what? They both have families that they want to go home to that day.
That was our siren song traditionally in the safety culture that we created prior to whatever happened. I'm not sure what happened.
And I think it's really interesting that I just caught myself doing a slip where I'd say a guy, because for us in our culture, that's a gender neutral term.
Yeah, totally.
That's an absolutely gender neutral
term. I was never
term.
particular about guy, gal. I couldn't care less. I mean, again, I'm Latina, so, if we don't know the sex, we assume the masculine. I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah, no, it's a very gender neutral term for us. And so these are people with kids to feed, with homes to go to. They have just...
We want to get home, yeah.
Yeah, they want to get home, but they have just as much interest as that energy being delivered safely as the people the energy is being delivered safely to.
Well, I would actually argue we have more. We have a little bit more passion about it because we understand, one, its vitality. Two, it's... we have a real respect for the danger of it.
Well, I mean, these are the two most powerful commodities in the world.
And these are people that work upwards of 15, 16-hour days, on the reg.
Yeah, and
come home filthy dirty, like I mean, the guys in the construction school used to, joke about how their wives had a separate washer and dryer, right? Yeah. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I have. They got dirty out there
because they get that dirty. Yeah. So that's why we just have mad respect. I mean, that's really what we're doing here. There's like this huge vacuum of the actual experts in the field. They used to call us experts in the field, boots on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
The blue jeans, the blue trucks, whatever you want to call them. But the guys and the gals, like you say, that are actually doing the work. This is something that we have a unique opportunity to bring the people to the table that have actually been there and done that. So, and Crystal's definitely one of those people. And I would say, having worked with her, she is so good at what she does.
I think what I love the most about what I do is that I think for me, I love the part of my work that makes it so people who are brilliant get to go be brilliant and not worry about the background noise.
You were so good at that. And didn't we have a brilliant team? Weren't we talking about that today? So that's something we could touch.
We had a really brilliant team.
So we were lucky and blessed to have, we're not going to name him because we haven't gotten his permission, but we're going to call him just the Bruce Bochy.
Yes.
Of the academy. So when I came in, the gentleman who hired me, he was quite an infamous character.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, and he assembled quite the team. And I often compare us to the 2010 Giants because didn't we hit it out of the park, Crystal? You were there, right?
Yeah, I think I was. So when I came on, our Bruce Bochy was still there. I actually, I had two. I called him Batman. So I had Batman and Bruce Bochy.
Right, yeah. The two.
Yeah, I had Batman and Bruce Bochy, and these guys could not have been
they were great.
More patient. And the more I got to know what their vision was, And the more I got to, so there was the vision of what needed to happen. There was what was actually happening in instruction in the classroom. And then there was me in the middle of those two
right,
things.
because if I were to classify Bruce Bochy and Batman, because you're right, those two were quite a team, and they were also controversial, but I didn't think they were controversial at all. I thought they were great at what they did. I thought they were very balanced.
Brilliant leaders.
I thought they were very balanced.
Brilliant leaders.
I thought that Batman has a great understanding of structure. He knows the content, and I mean, of course, Bruce Bochy knows the content. But what Bruce was great at, he was great at the team.
He was absolutely.
He brought this team together
at team building,
and he was a team builder. And you know what I'm going to say about that guy? He was a huge supporter of women.
You know what's so funny? I was about to say that
he was one of my biggest supporters. He was one of my reasons why I excelled so much there, and he was that way from the very, very, very beginning.
That was my experience of him too, because when I came in, one, there was no piece of information he wasn't willing to share, and any idea I had, anything that I thought needed to be done, anything that I heard of that I wanted to correct, I was not allowed to be disrespected by any stretch of the imagination.
Right, and he was always there to listen. He was always had an ear, and he encouraged.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was thinking about going into the line department, Crystal, because I did have pole climbing experience, not quite to the extent that that the electric guys go, but I was like, hey, they got the schedule. I can't do the 4 to midnight schedule, so that's what I'm going to do. And he was my big, he was the one, he's like, you can do it. He's he's the biggest cheerleader for women.
Yeah.
Just going for the gust.
He was really brilliant. I think what was really great with him is he absolutely recognized my capacity and never tried to push me past it. He wasn't threatened by it. No, he loved it. He absolutely would. I mean, it got to a point where he was directing people to me. Like, hey, if you have an issue in the classroom, Crystal needs to be your first phone call, your first
and Batman
text message.
Too, right?
Batman. Yeah, Batman did the same thing. He was the one who started coming to me. Hey, this is out of date. Even if it was like, I have no idea what you were, because I came in and I'm like, what's a procedure? When I started. Yeah. And so I sat down and he was like, oh, and he's explaining to me. Oh,
he's the best to explain.
Yeah, he actually explained
He was amazing in action. Yeah, I love to watch him
I actually,
teach
like,
classes.
over time, got to have, I think I had like 100, almost 200 classes that were just mine. I say mine, but to me they were.
That's how you took it, yeah.
And it was my job to make sure that the instructor could walk into that room and take for granted they had everything they needed and everything was perfect. So it really was, Bochy and Batman, sitting down and going, oh, this is where this information comes from. So I'm reading governance documents, procedures. I'm making sure that the curriculum, I have the right curriculum happening. And so over time, going into the classrooms and watching these tradesmen and women learn the jobs that are going to be their careers for their lifetime, and sitting with them, because I'm sitting down trying to get their experience, and I'd go sit with the instructors and try and get their experience, and I'm like, how do I be the cushion around them so that is a safe and sacred space for every class, every time?
Well, you did it. You were successful. You did it successfully for many years. I fell in love with you. I automatically fell in love with this woman. She was my type from the very, very beginning. And then I fell in love with Humboldt. And she decided she was going to go to Humboldt. And I decided I was going to follow her. Do you want to crest on a little bit on that story? Do you want to take a little bit of a break? Sure. We're about at the half-hour mark.
No, I'm okay. I'm ready to dive in. Okay. So, Christina and I fell in love, and I think it was probably a couple years into my career. Bochy had retired, so I'd actually moved into his office.
And Batman. No, Batman was still around.
Batman was still there.
Yes, thank God.
And you know, Batman had moved on. He had started the school out in Tracy, so I was supporting.
Right.
So I wasn't just supporting where we were. I was supporting learning in multiple locations.
Yeah. And not just that, but running the best damn road show on the road. I mean, talk about seamless. Running wrangling in these supervisors the way you did, and making sure the butts were in the seats, making sure the rosters were full, making sure that we had what we needed when we needed it, and that we had everything we needed as far as gate codes and who our contact supervisor was. All of those things on the invite, on the calendar. You had just had it all buttoned down.
I mean, I think what we really need to focus on with that is how remarkable and how important, when you're working in the trades, relationships are.
Yes. That's powerful.
I mean, honestly, you can be the worst at your job. You can be the best at your job. No one's going to care you're the best at your job if you don't have those relationships. And you can't pass on your knowledge to the worst at the job or the new guy if you don't have those relationships. So those relationships, that institutional knowledge that goes passed down from amongst those tradespeople as they come in every year. And I cannot express this enough. When I walk into a classroom and these guys and gals are learning high level mathematics, because what they're dealing with is essentially commodities with physics behind it. Right. This is very serious stuff. We're talking high temperatures, explosives, electrocutions, like these
flash
arc flash.
Right.
They have to know the physics. They have to know the math. It's not just someone out there turning a wrench. It's not just someone out there, with, some conduit doing a weld. It's not just someone out there with rubber gloves cutting on some wire. That is not what this is. And so that learning, those relationships are so critical. And so when
you know how Sensei put it? He told me when I first started, he said, you know what? And this, I didn't realize it till I got to the academy, how true this was. But he said, you know what? He said, there's going to come a time, if you need it, where you're going to be able to ride on your reputation. But in this industry, you got to build it first.
Yes. Absolutely. And one of the best ways to build it is to put yourself in a place of, I'm the dumbest guy in the room. Yeah. I actually felt like I struggled with my relationships.
And there isn't anybody I can't learn from, right?
Right. I feel like I actually did struggle with my relationships because I did not like that feeling. But then when I adopted it, I think really in saying, and you were actually really pivotal in that. And I was like, I know all the course codes. Do you know every word of the text? I was like, no, but I'm going to. And so for me, it was so
she
funny.
Loves me because I challenge her.
Well, I mean, and they all did. And I think what really came down to is, one, is this something I should be handling for you guys? Let's set up that relationship. Right. And every relationship is boundaries,
because those plus deltas were powerful, right? We came out of it, every time we could get ahead of the curve. And that's especially powerful to do when you're on the road doing that. Yeah. And when you can make that impression to your clientele, it's huge, right? It's huge. Yeah. So when what you're talking about, the seamlessness of having everything the instructor needs in the classroom at the time, without having to worry about it. Yeah. Lights, camera, action, you're on. And that is how you make an impression.
Right. And the thing is, and it was ongoing. Right. Because learning is iterative.
Constantly changing, right?
Yeah. Learning is iterative. Training is iterative. And so
our type of training was very demonstrative, right? Because technical training is very hands-on.
It's very hands-on. Technical training and its methodology. It is, you're intellectually going to have it explained to you, so it's in your brain, and that's great. So here's your theory, but then you're physically going to handle this thing, and we're going to walk you through it. Now we're going to watch you do it to make sure you understand this. Congratulations. Now you're going to do it on your own. You have to take a test and prove it to us. Right. That you know this, but you cannot do it, especially in energy delivery and utilities, without actually getting your hands on, from the most minute touches on a gas meter to how to properly dig a hole. You have to know how to do this, locating and mark, you know.
And I would say transversely, you can't learn it all at the academy either.
No.
And just as the young GSR that we saw this morning was talking about, you know, the on-the-job training is a crucial piece.
Critical. And so for me, when I'm making those phone calls to supervisors, I am an ambassador before you guys show up.
Yes, and you definitely showed up to that role.
Yeah, and because I wanted you guys to go in there, but also too because a lot of times there's ongoing training. It's not just new people to the trades. You have to keep requalifying to do your job.
Right.
And so when
we didn't just do onboarding. That's a good point. We're not just doing onboarding.
You're in training constantly to make sure
those
you are
welders, Crystal.
You have to be up to date, up to speed all the time.
Yeah.
And so with doing that and making sure those preparations were made, and it sounds bigger than it was. It was literally me making a phone call and taking some notes. But what it did do is those guys that are seasoned in the room that are requalifying on something, and that instructor shows up with all of the materials ready to go, that runs smoothly. It encourages that seasoned employee to take on the role of being a trainer themselves. Because of that relationship. It also
helps smooth the path for future, engagements, because you've shown up and shown that you did a good job. Those supervisors the next time around are going to take you more seriously. Every time you do it again and again, it's just repetition. You know, it's going to get even better. And you were talking about relationships.
Yes.
That, especially when you're talking about road shows and that. Especially in the energy industry, because it is so reputation oriented, and these people are not the kind of people, you know, that they're not the kind of people to be taken lightly. They're not the kind of people that are just going to listen to you. You know, they're definitely a prove it to me kind of people. And so the more you can establish that repetition of this is how we do things, we just lockstep, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I think what's really critical,
that seems to me to be the missing piece.
Yeah, I think what's really
interesting. It seems to me that there's there's so much posturing that we don't adapt what's working, and that people are constantly trying to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting was the question for me of what do you need? To me, that was a game-changing question.
So rare a question to be asked.
To me, that was the game-changing question.
It is.
I remember, and there was a very significant shift in my relationships with supervisors, because it would be like, I'm in the middle of my work, I'm trying to do all of the things that I think need to be done, right? I think I'm doing them really well. And it'd be like, oh my God, what now? And then maybe a year and a half in, every single time an instructor showed up to my office, I would stop what I was doing. What do you need? Okay. And I would literally look at the time and I'd say, where are you in class right now? Look at the time. Okay. Can you send them to a break in this amount of time? I can come switch everything out, whatever it is. So when I started asking the question, what do you need? Okay, cool. Also, I've made that correction for the next time. I've already put it in the bank. And so that question of what do you need? So then instead of waiting them to come to my door, I would say, hey, we have a new curricula came out. What do you need? I'm going to write every single thing down that you say.
Yeah.
And
right. And then from there came the process mapping and
yeah. And so when supervisors would call me, what do you need? When it was time for a road show to happen, having been able to answer that question, I could say, this is what we need.
Well, and not only that, the beauty of you putting everything in the calendar is I noticed is that once it's in the calendar, it's always in the calendar. You can go back and review. You might not even need to ask that supervisor what he needs. It might, you might have everything you need. So that the organization that you demonstrated and all of those things, it didn't work out.
Yeah,
it didn't work out at the academy, did it?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
You know, I think for me, I'm really, really proud of the work that I did. By the time I left, you know, I agree. I had 17 sessions a week on average over 4+ years.
We're hugely successful.
I think I did the math once. Of course, I mean, I'm sure I did the math once. I know I did. I just can't remember the exact number, but I know it was somewhere upward of 4,000 sessions.
Wow.
I had 4,000 sessions of various different classes, various different varieties, different versions, different instructors, different circumstances, different locations. You know, I got to work very deeply into the back end enterprise work that it takes to run a utility, you know, and get to know that. So we got really, really blessed and be able to do that. But I think the best part of my job and what I'm most proud of is the fact that I know in some small way, most of the learners have no idea that came through that school have no idea who I am.
Right. And that,
they have no idea, and that is fine. But again, those people are out there doing their jobs well.
That is the nature of the energy industry. We are so used to not being seen.
Yes.
You're not supposed to be thinking about your utility company.
No. For as powerful as these commodities are and the losses that we've had, and I feel every single one of them. I want more than anything is for people to be able to turn on their stove to feed their families and turn their light on so they can enjoy their home at night and never think about it. They never think about the process.
It used to be that way.
Yeah. You know, when it's critical infrastructure, it's a really important
thing. Largely misunderstood infrastructure. I think so. I think so. I mean, I can't claim to speak for electric. I would be always speaking for natural gas, but speaking for natural gas, it just really seems to me that there's a lot of propaganda around natural gas, because the idea that natural gas is unsafe or dirty or any of those things. No. I mean, natural gas, a clean burning flame, produces water vapor, carbon monoxide, or carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Right. So carbon dioxide isn't that
natural...
what trees produce?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not dirty.
No.
And it's not unsafe if it's maintained properly and the appliances are all maintained properly. It actually works fairly well.
I think as we're talking about people in the trades, especially today, I love Labor Day. I absolutely, having worked with so many bargaining unit employees and these, the tradespeople, whether they be, the first time a meter reader hits the street to a very seasoned elevator mechanic, to your electrician that comes to your home, to your transmission line guy who's up on the road. When I'm thinking of the men and women that do this work and the mountain of people behind them, when you were in the truck, to support the one person out in the truck took 3 people behind the scenes. At least. If any of those 3 people aren't on point and are not doing their job, you have someone who is doing a vital function.
So break that down. Who would be the 3 people supporting the GSR specifically?
So it'd be your GSR specifically, your leader, your supervisor, and whoever is handling your clerk duty and your material handlers. And I typically lead those into one. So it takes those 3 people making
Sometimes
sure
they are, depending on the yard.
Yeah, it depends on the yard. So for me, up to 4. So it's the person making sure you're supplied appropriately.
I would add dispatch to that.
Didn't I say your dispatcher?
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe your dispatcher and then your leader in case of an emergent situation.
Yes.
So it takes those 3 people being really good at their jobs for a gas service representative or a lineman who's working that night, at least 3, and they have to be very good at what they do, because we need those people, those frontline folks, because they are emergency responders too, in their communities. They need to be fully supported, because if they're not, it can cause untold physical, mental, emotional, psychological damage to them.
Right.
And it can cause severe harm to the community if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the fitness for duty. So you're kind of you're getting close to the idea of fitness for duty. You're talking a lot about support. I appreciate and this is, of course, where your mind thinks, because this is
what I
do. Your background and
Yeah.
not just your background, but what you're passionate about. So, and you're absolutely correct. That support system is very important. And the other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on is that you mentioned first responder. This is something that I discovered to be a rub, is that people don't necessarily understand that in energy there are first responders.
Correct. Yes.
So, so that's basically just the people responding to the
Yeah, so let's break that down. So for example, you are living in a neighborhood, and a lot of neighborhoods in the United States are this way. You're in a neighborhood plumbed for natural gas, right?
Right.
If a building is on fire, there's really only so much a fire department can do until that gas is shut off.
Right.
You need a GSR to come in, get the access, and kill it. They need to basically clear it. They need to shut off the flow of energy. Now, if you're in a situation, let's say a line is down on the street on a rainy day, don't ever go near it. Police, fire department, they will not go near it. They can't do anything until a lineman arrives, assesses the situation, and manages the clearance of that line so it can be safely and properly removed. So even the first responders, as we think of them as our police, paramedics, fire department, cannot do anything until the energy that is now deemed unsafe, even though the energy was safe, but an exigent circumstance.
In what we call an abnormal atmospheric.
Right. So an exigent circumstance.
Oh, abnormal operating condition. That's the one.
An abnormal operating condition came and exposed that energy when it shouldn't have been. So that energy needs to be removed before it causes real harm. And so those, the dispatcher has to be on point. Right. That supervisor has to be ready to make a phone call in case they need crew support. They need to make sure that material handler better showed up that day to make sure that they have all of the equipment that they need. And it's not like you guys are going out in your trucks not checking to make sure you have all your stuff.
Right.
Because if you don't, you're going to be delayed getting on the street, making sure you have all of your stuff.
Right.
So for me, and having been in that world, that support system world, and knowing how critical it is, and I've actually seen what happens when those functions are not there, or they're operating improperly, and what it does do to these people that are basically in charge of turning on and turning off energy so we have the safest living conditions as regular folks do as possible.
Right. So touching on fitness for duty, how would you demonstrate to somebody who, one, doesn't understand what fitness for duty is, and two, doesn't understand why it's so important? How would you break that down for somebody?
I would say this. Fitness for duty is the mental, physical, and emotional capacity to do your job at the highest level possible. In our world, that one not only is an incredible sense of situational awareness, it is also finite detail and recall. Knowing exactly what your resources are, where they are, what your procedures are. If you don't, you know the procedure exists, you know how to read it. So it takes all three: physical, mental, emotional capacity to do that work. Now,
how does that relate to being a federally regulated employee? Do you think it's important that federally regulated employees are fit for duty?
Oh my God, they have to be. They absolutely have to be. When you're dealing in something that's federally regulated, typically it's because it's a very dangerous and powerful commodity. Whether that be you're a federal law enforcement officer, you're handling critical infrastructure, you have to be able to have your situational awareness completely on point. You can exercise your expertise flawlessly in any given situation. So you need to be in a place where you are clear and only focused on the job at hand. And
no, you're somebody who's, not to interrupt you, but you're somebody who's worked with these, you said that in the very beginning, that you're somebody who's worked with these professionals that have been doing it for years and years and years. Do you get the sense from the people that have been doing it for years and years, that the people that worked at the academy, for instance, do you get the feeling that that they're not the experts that they claim to be? Do you get the feeling that they are? Do you think that they're trustworthy to make those decisions as to whether or not they're fit for duty?
The people that I worked with at the academy, I would say, we have these wonderful little puppers.
You tell them, Tony. You tell her. Don't let her do that, Tone.
Hey, it's life at Rainbow's End. I would say that the people that I worked with the academy, the level of expertise that they had, not only with their own selves, because everybody's the expert on themselves, but also the experience that they have had.
Relative to the job.
Relative to the job, but working with others and the observations they've made. The amount of coaching that they've had to do in their careers, I would say that they would absolutely be, no one would be able to tell whether they were, their own selves were fit for duty more or not. If they're like, my shoulder hurts, so I'm not going to be able to go lift these things, they're absolutely going to call it in and say, I can't do this today.
Can you explain what stop work authority is for the layman?
Stop work authority is really whenever you feel like a situation is in some way unsafe or cannot be managed well. Let's say, for example, if I'm moving some inventory around and I have a coworker assigned to help me that day, and I see that coworker, the coworker is complaining of like a headache or something, or they have lower back pain. It's my job, and I know that like I can't do this work on my own. It would be my job to say, okay, we need to stop. We need to stop. You're gonna get hurt. Let's not do this. Or let's say I'm going into an old C van to build out records before. This is one that's happened to me multiple times, where I'd say, oh, I'd peek my head in, I'd look around, and I'd say, okay, we have a mold issue here. I don't have the proper equipment to do this. I need to call I need to call my boss. This is a remediation situation. I do not have the proper PPE to go in, nor do I have the proper vehicle to transport these documents in. I'm stopping the job. So it's any reason that the job cannot happen the way it should safely.
And could it include not doing the job at all? Could it include just saying, you know what, this isn't the right conditions, the right time, or whatever? It's any iteration along the course or timeline of the job.
Yes,
at any point
you should absolutely stop the job if there is a safety concern in any type of way. If it's a situation where it's like I got to drive to Lodi or drive home from Lodi, and I am too tired because I can't perform. Right. If I feel like for some reason I can't perform, that one, it's a hard call to make, but it's an incredibly important call to make, because here's what happens. If I'm too tired to drive home, let's say I doze off, I've put myself at risk. I've put other drivers at risk. I'm on company time. I've put the company at risk. I could have something of the companies that I'm transporting, but not only
including fellow employees.
So what do? I stop. I'm going to take a rest. I'm going to. So I think,
and your experience of PG&E, would you say that there's a huge focus? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, in your experience, would you say what is the focus? 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, of safety as a culture? So how much does PG&E talk about safety? How much do they talk about all these concepts? You're talking about situational awareness, stop work authority.
Or how much do they honor it?
How much? Okay, well, let's talk about that. You know?
Yeah, what I think is really interesting.
Let's start with a culture. Culture-wise, what would you say from when you stepped in from, let's say as a new employee, what was your impression of that specifically? The safety culture.
I mean, I was working a desk job when I came in, and I started to hear about it. You know, safety first, but it wasn't necessarily defined. And quite frankly, when I left, I don't think it was very well defined. They started putting out, you know, kind of publications that gave you more definition. It was not mature when I started. I think it was far more mature when I left.
It's definitely different in the offices. I agree with that.
I feel like, honestly,
that is a very important
I feel like I
point
had
to
more
make.
stop work authority technically as, you know, a non-trade, because I was not a union employee. I feel like I had more stop work authority than my union peers who were doing really dangerous work. And not that I wasn't in dangerous situations. You know, I reported to the fires, and I was
you've seen it. You've certainly been around it.
Yeah, I've been around it.
So that's an interesting point. So
yeah, I would say for my peers in the field, if their stop work authority, I feel like they still get backlash.
So think of your time before the academy. So your time at the academy is unique because you're working with individuals who have been worked in, you know, you've working closely with people that have worked in the field. However, before that, you were just in the office. So before you were actually interacting with these people face to face, do you think it would be easy to quantify whether or not, from your perspective, that person is fit for duty? Do you think it's, in other words, do you think it's appropriate that somebody who's been in an office, somebody who maybe hasn't experienced the level of safety culture, awareness that somebody in the field might, do you think that it's appropriate that somebody in the office would try to assess whether or not that person was fit for duty, or whether or not they were being genuine about whether or not they were fit for duty?
So I would say, for me, like, if I'm still an office employee, I would absolutely, if I'm in a situation where it's like, if I'm hearing something or whatever, I'd be like, hey, stop work. I can do that. It's stop work. Let's take a minute. Let's take a knee. Let's stop work. Would I then go on to be like, I could totally assess the situation and determine if a person is fit for duty? No. I would feel comfortable saying, maybe no, stop work, call out, call whoever.
Right.
I'm saying call the person that would be able to assess that situation. Right. Does that make sense?
Right.
And I've been in that situation. There have been times where I've been like, oh no, we need to stop.
You were in that situation with me.
I was. And I did. That was a really difficult, to me, saying no, pulling the stop work thing. Not only, you know, as your fellow employee, I still to this day feel was like the right decision to make. Would I be the one to determine whether you were fit for duty or not? No.
Right.
No.
Of course, right? So that makes perfect sense, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's exactly,
you know, that was
that's exactly kind of where I'm going with that. That it just only makes sense that the expert in the field, the person who's in their body, the person who understands, you know, that they're the ones that decide whether or not they're fit for duty.
Yeah, and especially,
and maybe that's where, you know, maybe that's where we're actually circling back to value.
Yeah, well, I think what's really,
if we really value that expert's expertise.
Yeah. Well, it's just like no physician treats themselves, right? But they aren't going to go to their receptionist to look at a head wound, are they?
Right.
No, they're going to go to another physician.
Right.
So it's kind of the same situation. Like, why would you come to, you know, at the time?
I was tricking you a little bit, because that was my experience of value.
Yeah.
As I was trying to navigate this invisible injury, was that the people that I was trying to talk to about it didn't have an appreciation.
No.
For the work that I did. for
No,
the
I don't
for
think
the
they understood
safety critical nature of it.
No.
For the importance of whether or not I was fit for duty.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like the genuine and general reaction to my need for care was that one, there was no infrastructure in place, and two, that I wasn't being taken seriously.
No, I feel like what was really I feel like looking back.
And I think it was because the people I was trying to communicate with just did not have an appreciation for the value of the nature of the work that the field work that we do.
No, I don't think so. And like I said, for me, just having gotten to be so close.
Yeah, you have a very unique perspective on this. This is why I wanted to bring you in.
Yeah, getting to be so close to it, watching it happen, and having, these are my coworkers, these are my peers, these are my friends, and I have them all over this service territory. I care about their families, I care about the communities that they're in, because not only are we workers, we're customers too.
Right. They're our neighbors.
They're our neighbors. I think that because they don't know the absolute 100% capacity that has to be operated at, and you cannot be cavalier in this job.
One of the ways I like to demonstrate it is when we're OQing, what is our cut score when we have a written exam for an OQ?
100%.
Right. So if we get anything less than 100%,
it's a fail.
Correct. And that's the same for the performance?
Yeah.
And our first responders are leaving the home at 3:00 in the morning.
Yes.
To deal with
24/7. There are people on the streets.
Grandma's carbon monoxide detector that's going off.
Yeah. 24/7. It never sleeps. It never stops. So I think when we're talking about fitness for duty and the level of care, we have to remember that these people, these particular tradespeople in utility, in energy delivery, transmission, distribution, electricians, plumbers, when they're showing up, they're also taking on, it's not just the job that they're doing at work. They're taking on making sure that they're okay at home, that they're okay personally. That is part of the job.
The work-life balance.
The work-life balance. So if something happens and they can't perform, it's not like they can just be replaced. You cannot.
Right, because like we've said,
you can't,
5 years to get somebody up to speed.
It takes 5 years. They cannot just be replaced. And so it really is incumbent upon the infrastructure to support these individuals. And that's when I would say value. The value alone is 5 years worth of work, which is not only a time investment, it is a money investment. It is cheaper to provide work-life balance and whole life care to these employees than it is to not, because one, the cost to care for them after a critical injury, whether it's a seen injury or an unseen injury, is incredibly expensive and quite frankly demoralizing to that person who you don't just go into that job just to go into that job, because if you do, you're not going to last. You do that job because you love it. So not only do you have this member of society that is not being able to do what they really love to do, you have a 5-year lag in getting them replaced.